Our guests today are Emmy-winning comedy writers and performers. One has written for such shows as Hacks, Seinfeld, Curb Your Enthusiasm, Modern Family, The Larry Sanders Show, and Saturday Night Live, and 10 Academy Award shows. The other was the writer and producer for the Ellen Degeneres Show and TMZ. They have co-wrote an hilarious book called How to Write a Funny Speech for a Wedding, Bar Mitzvah, Graduation, and every other event you didn't want to go in the first place. Welcome to the Motivation Show, Carol Leifer and Rick Mitchell.
Thank you. Thank you so
Hi.
much. Hi.
Good to see you guys. And my first thought is, how did you cats first get to know each other and start to collaborate?
Well, Rick, you want to take this one?
Sure, yeah. Well, I was working at TMZ. This is back through when it started, probably around 2007, 2008. And I was on camera that time, one of the people in the newsroom who was in the back of the room throwing out jokes. And one day I'm walking back from lunch and I'm on the third floor outside and I hear someone yelling at me, "Hey, hey, you!" I'm looking around like, what? And I look down in the courtyard. There's this woman down here just going, "Hey, you!" Yeah, I'm like, "Me? Yeah, you." My buddy says, "Who's that?" And from three floors up, I go, "I think that's Carol Leifer." I knew from comedy, of course, and so I walk all the way down there, and she is the biggest TMZ fan, and knew me from the show, and we connected that way. She was just a fan, and I was a fan of hers, so that was really fun to be able to meet, and we've just kept in touch ever since.
Yeah. So we got together during the writer's strike, being friends, and basically, Rick had been to an event where someone laid an egg of a speech, and I had been to one where the father of the bride was doing a horrible speech, and we just commiserated and said, you know what? It's really not that hard to write a speech. People are so afraid of it. Let's just do a easy book, easy guide, walk people through the steps so people aren't so afraid. We did it for the good of the world, Eli, because how many times have we been to an event and somebody's speech not only puts a damper on the whole event, but the one that I've been to, people were talking about how bad the father's speech was at the valet parking lot. That ain't good.
Gosh
So,
darn, you've been at my speech, John. I thought nobody heard that one.
Yeah.
I thought that was buried and done.
no.
So, how did you arrive at the world's largest book title?
Well, I think it was important to us. When you have a book that's not only instructive, how to write a funny speech, but that's also funny, we wanted to give it a funny title so that when people pick it up, they know it's not written by Dale Carnegie to give at your next Rotary Club meeting. We wanted it to be funny off the bat. So that's why we made it a funny title too.
There's
Now,
so
when
many books out there that are, telling you how to do something funny and they're not funny.
Yeah.
And it's like, how am I supposed to believe what I'm reading if it's the person's not even funny? So it was important for it to be funny.
Good point. So I wanted to ask you guys, when you're growing up, I mean, not too many people say to themselves, I want to be a comedy writer, like when they're, in grade school. Like, how did this all like come about? How did you decide this is an area that you want to be in and be a comedian on top of that?
Rick, I'll let you go
Well,
first.
yeah, I had, you know, I was in college and I started trying stand up. I loved stand up whenever I saw it on TV, and I started trying it, and I loved it. I got a little bit of taste of the road, and it just wasn't totally for me. And so it was like, what's a way I can do comedy, but maybe stay in one place? So for me, that was writing, and I love it.
Mm-hmm. And for me, growing up on Long Island, as I did, my dad, even though he was an optometrist, and I always say, and his name was Seymour. Come on, people. Um,
As a little
so
shop of horrors, Seymour.
yes. Um, my dad was the king of the joke tellers. He was always like, give me a subject, any subject, and I'll tell a joke on the subject. And not only did he know an encyclopedia full of jokes, but he really told them well. He had a great delivery. But more than that, I saw how my dad connected with people through humor. If he didn't know people well, a joke would break the ice. Or when I worked for him as at his optical office, if he had patients who were nervous or apprehensive, he would tell a joke and it would really relax them. So right from the beginning, I saw, seeing my father connect with people like that, I felt like I want to connect with people like that. And, TV really influenced me a lot. I mean, I love Lucy. I can still lip sync every single episode. Carol Burnett, who wrote the foreword to our book. And I'm telling you, Eli, I just sent it to Rick. She just sent me an email saying, I reread the book and I loved it even more. Um, love Carol. And I swear to God, I teared up because that moment of like, I know not only Carol Burnett, but she's a friend. And to know if I was a little girl and you told me, oh, one day you'll be friends with Carol Burnett and she'll be so gracious to write the foreword to your book, I would never have believed it. When your idols become real people and they're even nicer and more generous than you imagine, it's just a thrill.
Speaking of legends like Carol Burnett and Lucy, how do you get on a comedy stage and say to yourself, boy, how can I be funny when you have legends like that who've been on stages? And how do you compete with that? Or do you try to compete with that? Like, what's the thought process? Like, you got Robin Williams and you got Jim Carrey and you got these people that are impossible to be funny like. You can be funny maybe in a different way, but
Yeah.
talk to that if you may.
Well, I've always felt it's a comedian personality, Eli. Okay. I always say most people's greatest fear is talking in front of large groups of people. Most comedians' fear is not talking in front of large groups of people. It totally has to be in your DNA. And when I'm sure, like Rick, when you go to your first open mic night, the audience is rooting for you, much like a speech. The bar is set pretty low. When you get up to give a speech, people know, a lot of people are sitting there thinking, well, thank God they didn't ask me. So it's a very warm room. And when you go into stand up on an open mic night, the audience realizes you're there as an amateur. So they give you a lot of support. So, I went into stand up because I loved being funny and I loved being in front of an audience all the time. So it seemed like a natural fit.
So, when you look at the odds for the average comedian, at a comedy club, most of them are long forgotten and they're now an accountant or a lawyer or something else. And I'm not sure how it works with being a comedy writer, but how hard is it to really sort of break in and be successful as a comedian and a comedy writer? You've actually both aced it, but you've made it look easy.
Well, Rick, tell your story because I think it's really amazing when you think about how some people got into the business. It's just amazing.
Yeah, I mean it's it is a lot of the who you know. The very first time I did stand up, I met someone there, a comedian there who was teaching a class named Karen Anderson, and we became friends. And a couple years later, Karen Anderson went down to LA to get back into writing, and she started writing for the Ellen Show. And I moved down to LA, and a while after that, she had contacted me because the producer of that show was starting TMZ. And so that got me into TMZ, and I was there for a while. And then when I left TMZ, I submitted a packet to Ellen, and the PA who was there on day one of Ellen was now the head writer and remembered me from hanging out at the show. And that's, it really is a lot of that who you know, as Carol will attest to as well. And it's never easy. It's never, I always thought it was like, once you're in, you're in. But oh my gosh, it's hard. There's no guarantees in this business. And you continue to just try to get jobs and try to work. But there's lots of people who are very talented who don't make it. And, there is a certain amount of luck to it and who you know. And so I've been very blessed, as Carol has as well, and of just the people I've known and how I got into the business and been able to stay in it.
So now you've both become very successful comedy writers. How many iterations of a comedy sketch do you typically go through before you feel you've reached like that holy grail for that skit? Take us through the writing process from like pounding away at your computer keys to the skit actually being accepted.
Well, the thing I love about comedy writing, first of all, as opposed to stand up, a lot of people don't realize is a very lonely existence. You're on the road most of the time. You travel by yourself. Your agent, your manager doesn't generally go with you. And I found it was, I didn't like being alone all that much. So the writer's room to me is like heaven because you're with all these funny people together. And what is so great about the writer's room is everyone plays off each other. And the material gets that much better because of that synergy. Like, for example, when I wrote on Seinfeld, what you would do when you had an idea was you would go to pitch Larry David and Jerry Seinfeld. They shared an office. And you kind of ran through your ideas, one or two sentences, really as simple as George brings a deaf woman with him to a party to lip read his girlfriend's lips to find out why she broke up with him. I mean, immediately, they were both like, yes, yes, we're going to do that. That's a great idea. And then as the writer, you would go back and write a draft. But then you would hand your draft to Larry David and Jerry Seinfeld, and they would do their pass on the script. And most writers are very precious about being rewritten. That was such a joy at Seinfeld because I knew, every writer knew, the draft was going to be that much better than what I handed in. And I actually learned a lot because when I would look at their draft, I looked what they kept of mine, I looked what they got rid of mine, and also what they changed. And I learned, I feel, kind of from the masters so much in looking at their draft. So much of it is collaboration. And I love that because you really do get the best product when you use all these minds together.
I love that idea of a collaboration rather than let your ego fly off the handle and say, no, you can't touch my speech.
Yes, yes, exactly.
So certainly when you have masters like Seinfeld and Larry David, they probably know a thing or two. So that sounds like a good idea. So do you guys have like a priming routine you like use before you get ready to go on stage or like give a wedding or other kind of speech?
Well, as we talk about in our book,
Jump on trampolines or something?
Yeah. Well, I think the best thing and what we talk, and I think it works for stand up and giving speeches, and what we talk about is doing your research and being prepared. Because the more prepared you are, the better you're going to feel about it. And so it's very important, for instance, with speeches of researching if you're doing a wedding, the bride, the groom, finding stories from people, what you can figure out about them, what you can use. And so the more prepared you are, just I think the less nervous you'll be. And that's the way to do it. The same thing with stand-up.
And that's the other thing that we wanted to hit hard in the book, Eli, is that people are always like, I'm so nervous before I give my speech. I mean, I'm still nervous, and I've been doing stand-up since dinosaurs roamed the earth. So it's natural to have some butterflies. And it's actually good to feel that because it gives you some energy when you go out there. So we wanted people to feel a comfort in if you're nervous, that's natural. Don't get on yourself about that. I mean, another big tip that we give people is if you're nervous, have a drink, not 6 or 7 drinks to loosen up because that is one of the giant mistakes that we like to point out in our book that people, and it's the only thing, right, Rick, that we put in caps in our book.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't go up there hammered because you might be feeling great, but how many times have you been to an event where the person that gets up there is hammered and it's so uncomfortable to watch.
We put it in caps, so even if they're drunk while reading it, they might see it.
Now, there are probably not too many people hammered at a funeral, hopefully, when they're giving their eulogy.
Yes.
And that's a particularly hard speech, I would think, to give. Tell us about your thoughts on giving a eulogy speech. How can you make that funny? And
Well,
also not offend anybody and be sincere
yeah.
about the deceased.
Well, we've both been to a lot of celebrations of life. And the misconception that most people make is that it's got to be all serious. And we found that in most celebrations of life, people really want to remember this person fondly. And if you have funny stories about them, people really enjoy them. So someone should go into a speech like that, knowing that, of course, you need to be heartfelt in remembering this person. But also, when you add a story or two about this person that everybody can relate to, it always goes over very well. I spoke at my cousin's memorial. He passed away sadly at 55 of cancer, but he was the biggest people person I've ever met. I mean, life of the party, social butterfly. And I told this story how we went to see the Beach Boys and we were lucky enough to be invited to the after party. And Mike Love was there. And I said to my cousin Jay, I want to go over to Mike Love. I opened for them 3,000 years ago at Harrah's in Tahoe. And, I was pacing and then I went to the bar to get a drink to make my move to Mike Love. I turn around, my cousin Jay is chatting with Mike Love like he's known him for a million years. Literally, I go over and my cousin Jay is like, hey, Mike, you remember my cousin Carol? She opened for you. So when I told that story, people loved it because everyone there knew my cousin Jay was the biggest people person in the world and they got a kick out of it. So don't be afraid to be funny speaking at a eulogy,
No,
giving a
don't
eulogy.
be too serious.
No, no, no.
Yeah,
You're
people want to be a
celebrating
little
the
bit
person.
uplifted and celebrate. Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's why you
Yes.
call it a celebration of life. Absolutely.
Hmm.
So, Carol, what are your like favorite skits that you've done in Saturday Night Live or Seinfeld? And I'm sure you've written many of them. Like, what has to this day made you real
Yeah.
proud?
Well, at SNL, I wrote a sketch with Al Franken that was called Quirky. And it eventually starred Tom Hanks and Joan Cusack, but I'm especially proud of it because at SNL, at the read through, where people read the scripts aloud, a few hosts had tried it. I remember Chevy Chase had tried it and didn't get through. And then when Tom Hanks did it, it did get on. So I'm especially proud of that. And especially when I see Al Franken out and about, I'm always like, hey, quirky, we got it on. And as opposed, in addition, Seinfeld, the Marble Rye episode was my episode. And I'm especially proud of that because, not to toot my own horn, but it's often in the top 5 episodes that people love of Seinfeld. And what was amazing about writing that was, Eli, this is in what we call the water cooler days of TV, where everybody could have seen the episode and did the night before. And I remember the day after it aired, I went to Brent's Deli in the Valley for lunch with some writer friends, and they had a big banner over the bakery saying, and we have the famous marble rye from Seinfeld. So, when something like that, before things being viral, went viral, it's such a thrill.
That's pretty cool. So let's get into the nitty gritty of your book or the gritty nitty.
Yes,
Hey, sign me up
yes.
as a comedy writer. I keep my day job. So how long should a speech be? And like, what are some of the signs that someone's special occasion speech is just too darn long? Like the rent being too damn high, bada bing, sticking to my day
Yeah,
job.
it's the great question, and it's the perfect question that so many people ask. And short, it needs to be short. We say no more than 5 minutes. That's the biggest problem that people make is they go too long in these speeches. they have this thought that, well, I know this person well, so I need to include everything I've ever known about them. You don't. You're still entertaining an audience. You can get across everything you need to say in less than 5 minutes. That's it. There's no way around it. I mean, you just any speech I've seen longer than that, it doesn't need to be longer. I've never seen a speech go long. Nobody's ever said like, "Oh gosh, that was too short." You know, it's almost like that was really long. So 5 minutes or less. That's it.
Yeah.
It's that easy.
I mean,
I agree.
yeah, the other thing that I think people are unaware of that we wanted to point out in the book is usually the speeches are before the food. So people, if there's too much time with the speeches, people are starting to get hangry and they want to wrap it up because you can't enjoy a speech when your stomach is growling and you're dying, smelling that buffet.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. People think they're actually at a big performance. They got to go on for 15 minutes and really get the crowd crazy. Keep it short. Same thing when I meet people at like a networking event. Sometimes people go on for like 10 minutes introducing themselves, and then you
Oh,
sort of space out. So brevity is the answer. I like that. So every time I go to a comedy show, Carol and Rick, it seems like the comedians seem to talk about two subjects all the time. It's kind of race, and they're always like cursing for emphasis. They're cursing up a storm. So you think we've gone too far, and what shouldn't we do at special events?
Well, yeah, that's the thing we say is keep it classy because there's too many people at these events who like to curse and think it's funny. And yeah, it is funny, but not in these events because you've got grandmas at a lot of these events. You've got, Nana, you've got aunts, you've got children. And you need to not use the F word. You need to not uh, do weird things to the audio equipment. That's just a good rule of thumb always. Don't get frisky with audio equipment. It's weird. So yeah, you need to not curse. That's it's that simple.
yeah.
You can't, and yeah, there's always exceptions. Look, if you're a guy at your bachelor party and it's just your bros there, well, yeah, okay, that's different. But so many of these events, it's this is the bride and groom's, one of their most memorable days. You don't want to put a black eye on this whole event.
What's the number one mistake that people make right out of the gate at a special event speech, and how should a great speech start, in your opinion?
Well, we found the biggest rookie mistake that people make when they get up to speak is not saying their name and who they are to the celebrant. I just went to a memorial 2 weeks ago. A guy get up, hey, I'm Matt. And then he starts talking about the person, and all you're doing is trying to figure out, is this someone who went to school with, or someone, a relative, somebody went to camp with? It becomes like an episode of NCIS. You want people to focus on your speech and knowing who you are to the person. I'm their cousin, I'm their brother, we went to school together. Just puts a nice frame around your speech, and the audience gets a context of who you are and why you're speaking in honor of this person, this couple.
And also, I mean, look, if I say, oh, I've known this person for 13 years, well, I'm going to be able to do some jokes that, other people might not be able to do. But if I don't tell people this, they're going to be like, is it okay if this guy says this? I don't know who he is.
Exactly.
So you
Also,
guys mentioned a
yeah.
writing trick you can do when you first start writing a speech. Let's say you get that so-called writer's block, and you're just not in the mood to write this long speech, and you're not really in a gung-ho mood. Like, how do you sort of just move it along the process?
Well, the beauty of our book, How to Write a Funny Speech, is that if you're super lazy or super intimidated, we have templates at the back of the book, kind of like Mad Libs, where you just fill in the blanks. We just make it that easy for you. So that's always a good way to go. Another thing that Rick and I do as comedy writers in the comedy world is, look, we get so many assignments where it's like, oh, I don't want to do this. And then you say to yourself, if I do this, I'm going to give myself 15 minutes, 15 minutes to do it. And if after 15 minutes I want to get up and do whatever, okay. 9 times out of 10, you keep going after 15 minutes. It's not as daunting as you thought it was going to be. So that's another hack that we thought we'd come up with to pass along to people.
What should the bulk of a speech consist of? What's the meat of it? What's the crux of that speech supposed to be about?
Well, I think your stories, what you know about this person. I mean, that's why people are there. They want to, why you give speeches. You want to hear about this person. So, like I said before, anything you can find out about this person, any attributes, interesting things you can talk about that everyone can relate to. I mean, that should be the bulk of it. And then also, as we say, people get a little afraid to be, a little heartfelt, but, everyone appreciates when you do that. And so, at that end of the speech should really be a nice heartfelt moment, what you say about the person, what they mean to you.
That's another little thing, Eli, that we put in the book. We've seen 1,000 times in speeches. People give a fantastic speech. They toast the person, the couple, and then they wander back to their seat. It's like so awkward. Like, go over to the couple, the person you're celebrating, give them a hug, give them a fist bump, whatever. It just kind of puts a nice bow on the whole speech. So yeah, we've always found it very awkward. Like people are taking out their hankies and, oh, what a great speech, from laughing and crying. And then they just, go to the buffet, like, where are the tater tots? It's just, go over to the people. You're obviously so important to them, the person that they asked you to give a speech. So really do that. Go over to them and put a nice button on the whole thing.
I'm guessing that the average person who gives a speech, who are not Carol Leifer and Rick Mitchell, probably walking out thinking, oh, I don't think I did a great job. So what are some of the reasons that people should actually feel good after their speech?
Well, look, I think as I said, the bar is so low with these things. I don't think people should be feeling that. Most speeches, and if you do what we say, you're going to get a good reaction, and it's going to feel good. That's part of why Carol and I do stand up. You go in there, you get that high of people laughing at you, and you're gonna get that. If you do what we say. So do what we say and buy this book. Otherwise, you will feel miserable.
Well, I've been reading the book and I've been looking at some of those templates, and I think I'm going to steal some of those from you guys. Well, I'm
Yeah,
stealing
that's
because
what,
that's what it's there for.
yeah.
And
And
I
also,
yeah,
Eli, sorry to interrupt,
go
but
ahead.
we also have, we call it jokes to steal. For every event,
Yep.
we have a glossary of jokes that you are more than welcome to take and use in your speech from two experienced comedy writers. Go at it.
Well, what I love about the book is you kind of give this like sequence of how you can just put something like together, and just put one little simple paragraph easily together and really make it work. You don't have to knock your brains out. So you're kind of given the whole formula right up front. And it's interesting because when I, of course, used to go to funerals, everyone seemed to be so solemn until one day I went to one. I'll never
Mhm.
forget this, right on the beach in Connecticut, and everybody was giving a eulogy, was just telling those stories. And you guys, and we talked about what's the meat of the speech? Stories. Stories. People want to hear stories, and people want to feel good. They don't want to just feel somber and down all the time. That's the first time I ever saw comedy making such a big impact, and I realized that you don't have to only be sad and somber and depressed and beaten up. You can feel good and celebrate that life. So great examples. So what I wanted to find out is what's next on your agendas. Where do we go from here?
What's next? Well, of course, we are out there selling. I always call myself Wilma Loman, out there on the road selling the book.
On your book tours, or you're on the
Yes.
Barnes and
Oh,
Nobles,
yeah.
and yeah, all
Yeah,
over
we're
the.
going to be
That's
on
cool.
that. And I'm also writing a comedy for the great Valerie Bertinelli. So that's in the works. And I love when I get to work with people who, she's another one, is sweet as sugar and so talented. So I'm excited about that.
So, what is a great way for people to follow both of you cats? A website, the easy way to get the book besides walking into Barnes and Noble on your site?
It's all over Amazon, everywhere on Amazon. I don't want to brag, but we are #1 on Amazon in public speaking. So that should tell you that we're getting
Hmm.
some really, really nice results. Barnes and Noble, I mean, we're on pretty much any book site you can find it, or on
Yep.
our websites. Yeah.
We're also in like the top 5 for self-help and psychology right now, which is an even huger category than public speaking. So, like we're up there, you're going to find it. If you type in Amazon how to write a funny speech, you don't even need the full funny title, just how to write a funny speech. That's the first book that comes up. It's light blue. It's really it sticks out.
And it's
You're going to
small
see
and
it.
handy. We didn't want to
It's
write,
small and handy.
a tome.
That's the first thing I noticed about the book is it's an unusual size, and
Yeah.
that's has a little bit of a comedic flair in itself, just the size of the book and the look of the book. So,
Yeah.
It's such an easy read too, and that's we wanted to make sure the easy read that it was funny. It's not, people who don't read, you're going to be able to read this.
well, I'll
You
agree
don't have
with
to be
that.
worried
It's
about
not
it.
going to sit on your bookshelf for 30 years, like having been like 1/10 read like most books. You can probably read this in a good solid weekend and get through the book. So yeah, anything else you guys want to add before we close?
I'm trying to think. This is really a good time we felt to have the book out because May, graduation season, June, wedding month, uh, perfect time for you to be prepared and not only write a funny speech, a good heartfelt speech, but feel good about it and not feel intimidated about sitting down and writing it. We really wanted people, Rick and I, we both love giving speeches, but the spotlight. But most people really fear it, and we really feel like if you pick up our book, you're gonna go out there, you're gonna be confident, and you're gonna do a great speech that people will remember.
Well, I want to go
I
back,
think
actually, if I may, just add, because fear is like the biggest challenge on the planet. People have more fear than of getting up on a stage than they do of literal death itself. And so Dr. Susan Jeffers, back in the old days, like 50 years ago, wrote a book called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway, meaning that the fear is going to be there, even for, professionals like you guys been around the block, you still have that sense of fear. But there are people who still, even understanding that title, that okay, just feel it anyway, just go up there. They still can't get themselves to go up and, do that eulogy. And then they feel bad that they flaked out and didn't have enough guts. Is there any other tips that you can possibly give that to get somebody to like get past that pendulum, and like, okay, something, I'm going to do it no matter how it comes out.
Well,
look, we didn't
yeah.
say no drinking. We said one drink. You can do one drink. At a comedy club. There's a 2 drink minimum. At wedding speeches, there's a 1 drink maximum.
Yes. And also, I tell this to people who are going to do their first open mic night in the comedy club. Fear, false expectations appearing real. If you
Yep.
look at it that way, it's much easier to get up there. And I've seen that situation where people are asked to give a speech and they chicken out because they're like, well, I'm not gonna do well. Not to tout our book, but our book gives you beginning, middle, and end. We have you covered with the jokes at the end, with the templates. There's no way that you can't write something that you're going to feel good about. And this is an important time in this person's life. And that they asked you and you said yes, that's a big deal. And you should feel good about that because that's how connected you are to these people that they want your thoughts, your feelings at this event. And like we said, the personal is the gold in a speech. You're the only person that has this relationship with this person. So just know that other people are not going to say what you're going to say. And don't go to AI. AI does not have a funny bone in its robot body. No AI. Absolutely.
Well, our guests today have been Carol Leifer and Rick Mitchell, and I'm actually using your book over and over again to write my little speeches. So the next time I'm going to ace it and
Fantastic.
feel good
Hey,
about it.
from the
So
big
I'm-
mocker.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
going to be the mocker. No question about it. So I want to urge everybody go out and pick up a copy of How to Write a Funny Speech. Thanks, guys, for being on the show today.
Thank you. Loved
thank
it.
you.